we go. Get to a balance. Close your eyes. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I went down at 3, and I know I'm bad at that. But that's your example right there. That's why players at the youth level have so poor body control. It's their brain just isn't patterned neurologically to establish good dynamic balance unless you practice that.
All right, welcome everyone to episode 11 of ITTV. Today we've got Justin Stone with the Cubs. We'll get into him in a minute, but before I go over all that, I want to make sure that I cover everything, all of our bases. No pun intended. Social media, if you need to follow us, want to follow us, or curious where we're at, it's just at Indiana Twins across the board, youtube.com/Indiana Twins, just trying to keep it simple. We do upload these afterward. We cut it up, put it on YouTube, and add timestamps. So if there's any topics that you saw that we were talking about and kind of want to reference those, or if you're just curious, kind of Cliff Notes version, you can click around and it'll allow you to click into those times in YouTube. So that's a nice feature when we upload those to YouTube within a day or two usually. I want to do a quick shout out. I've been doing this the last couple episodes because some of our sponsors, without having any games going on right now with our situation, haven't had any viewers. So quick shout out to the Mower Outlet in Mooresville. We actually had one of our board members go and purchase a lawnmower out there. So shout out to them and appreciate their support. And I wanted to do a quick little overview before we introduce Justin. We are going to talk movement a little bit today to kick it off. We're going to go deep dive into hitting. We're going to do a newer segment that we started this week called Twins Critique, and we'll try to take any Q&A. I'll kind of moderate that and view the social media to chime in with there. I've got special guest host Jason Clymore to my, I guess it's to my left. I don't know where he is for everybody else, but he's up top with me. So he is the president and founder of the Indiana Twins. For those of you that are not aware, he started it in 2012, and hitting is his passion. It's his thing, and I know that he has gotten an ungodly amount of information from our guest today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Justin Stone, the director of hitting for the Chicago Cubs. And Justin, if you could tell the audience a little bit about your baseball career, and kick it off.
Well, it's a pretty modest playing background. I grew up in a little farm town in southern Illinois called Robinson, population 6,000 and one stoplight. And went to Eastern Illinois and played football and baseball there. You know, thought I was a good player. I was an all-conference player. Thought I would probably get drafted and didn't. And at that point, I always thought when I was a collegiate player that I was going to be a better coach than I was a player, just kind of the way I processed the game. And really my break was my fifth year of football. I was calling around trying to find a GA position like in November because my football season was about over. And I was looking to coach, and I called over to Indiana State because they knew me as a player. And I said, hey, looking for a GA position. Do you have anything open? They said, we actually have a full-time position open. And I asked if I could get the opportunity to interview for it just for, if nothing else, just learning the interview process. And I interviewed against a bunch of JUCO coaches and Division II head coaches, and I ended up getting the job. So I was 22, thought I probably knew what I was doing, and later realized I didn't. And, I was a hitting coach in Division I baseball, 22, and already recruiting at, 22, 23, 24. And it kind of springboarded me to have more responsibility than I was really ready for, but set me up for what I did for the White Sox and certainly for what I do now.
Yeah. So being the director of hitting, and you can talk a little bit about your previous role too with the Cubs because you had something just before this, but what does a day-to-day look like? And I know this year's been kind of skewed a little bit differently. Maybe you can kind of forecast what it would have looked like, but what had that looked like prior to spring training in the off season, kind of just day-to-day for you in spring training, and then what was it going to be looking like when the season got started?
Sure. Yeah, it's really no different logistically than what I was doing in elite baseball training. We have a big facility in Chicago, and we have 50 employees, and I've built a system because no matter what, if you have a big facility, you guys probably deal with the same thing there, like everybody wants to come in and hit with me. And that's just not feasible, right? And especially as the business grows and gets bigger, you're running the business. And the more you run the business, the less time you're actually probably instructing. But if you build a quality system and teach your employees underneath that how to capitalize on their strengths within that system, then everybody flourishes and the business gets better. So that's essentially the same thing I'm doing with the Cubs. I'm like building a sustainable system consistent across all platforms, from a kid in the Dominican that's 17 years old that we just signed up to our AAA guys, and how that system will go from level to level in addition to upgrading kind of our technology capability. That, I mean, a lot of people know in the industry that's kind of my background or strength. And then pairing coaches, so doing all the hiring to put the right people on the right parts of the bus, where we have some very experienced, awesome coaches that have been doing it for 10 or 15 years that had a playing background but may not know the latest in the new technology or movement patterns that come they're very popular in the new age of baseball, and pairing them with somebody that may have that background but doesn't have the playing experience, and trying to get them in a cohesive, holistic environment where everybody can get better from one another. And you'd be surprised really in professional baseball how siloed it is, where everybody kind of has their own lane. So it's kind of knocking those walls down. I kind of pictured my first couple months where most of the work was done for the Cubs in the front office. And it's nice because I live right down the street from the front office. So I would bounce from the front office at the stadium, and I would go to my facility in the afternoons or evenings, or I might start my day at the facility at 7 a.m., then go over to the stadium and come back. So I was still wearing two hats, but most of my work was done in the first 2 months with the Cubs of doing just that, like building the system. And I'm doing that. It's more of a front office job. After year 1 or 2, if I'm in the cage coaching somebody, I'm probably not doing my job very well, because you want to put people in a position where the coaches that in pro ball have a ton of responsibility outside of just coaching. It takes away from what they do really well and what you hired them for. So I feel like really I'm a producer, and I want to make their jobs easier, to put them in a place where they're concentrating on making our players better and let me deal with everything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm sure it would have evolved a little bit more as the season would have gone on. And I know you're big into the numbers, and you get to look at a lot of the data with a lot of your guys. I was telling Jason, a good question to ask you would be, because I'm sure this audience, kind of the lay baseball fan, that would be curious to hear what's been kind of the coolest, like, step back and just kind of look around and be like, I'm either getting to look at a video of this guy or have a conversation on the phone with this guy, or I'm talking in person with this guy, or something where you're just like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, there's probably 2 of them that I can think of. One, and I mentioned just you guys talking earlier today, Andy Haynes, who we've been lifelong friends. We played at Eastern Illinois together. We played in high school against one another. Very similar backgrounds, growing up in the sticks of Southern Illinois and having no access to anything like you guys are doing, or we do in our facility. We just love the game. And I'm not in the dugout very often, but periodically I would go in the dugout for the spring training games just to check up on if we had 12 or 14 minor leaguers in that particular day's game. I just wanted to, talk through their bats, et cetera. And first game that I did, I look across the field and Andy is coaching the Brewers and I'm in uniform for the Cubs. I'm like, we started coaching together when we were 22 years old, doing hitting camp in Robinson, Illinois, and Louisville, Illinois, and thinking like, this has come a long way for 2 guys that didn't play beyond small Division I baseball, that never played a day of pro ball. So that was one. And another one was, spring training days start pretty early in the day. And I was just walking through the cage, just making sure everything was in place and guys had the necessary tools that they needed and cages were flowing well. And Ryan Sandberg's standing there, and he's just standing there. He's got his arms kind of folded. And, it's pretty intimidating to walk by a Hall of Famer when you're basically, theoretically a nobody. And I'd seen Ryan several times over the past 3 years, but never really said anything more than hi, and never had introduced myself. And I walked by him, and I thought, I just had like one of those moments where time slowed down a little bit, and he wants to talk to somebody. He's bored, and I can tell he had something in his mind he wanted to say. And I took about 4 steps past him and did a 180 and turned back around, extended my hand and said, "Hey, Ryan, I'm Justin Stone. I'm the director of hitting." And it went into just blasting hitting knowledge, just like golden nuggets. And we talked for about a half hour, and I just kept prompting him with questions. And I thought to myself, that was like an aha moment for sure. And at the end of the conversation, I found an appropriate end, and I said, "Thanks for your time. These are all things that I want to continue to grow." And kind of why I'm at in the position I'm in is because I've always been a lifelong learner, and there's never a day you're going to hear me say I found the way. Like, I always want to get better myself. I actually half sprinted to my office and wrote down everything that he had said in that. And I actually wrote it up, and I've saved it since then. I've got it saved in my archives. But I think that's one of those conversations you're going to look back on one day and say, like, this is a Hall of Famer that, yeah, we might – he's been a manager, but he hasn't coached in an environment like you and I are doing or had a bunch of hitters you're responsible for. But this guy knows so much about hitting in that type of environment in a one-on-one basis. It was absolutely amazing. His guard was down. He was giving me just tons of some very valuable information about the way things maybe were different in the 1980s, but still how they were the same.
That's awesome. I noticed a little note in there that you mentioned that some people might have kind of glossed over. You found an appropriate end. I can't imagine how nervous you were to not only talk to him, continue the conversation, but then feel comfortable enough to, okay, this is awkward. How do I end the conversation? So that's,
yeah,
I
think it's having the feel of that type of situation, right? Like,
yeah,
you don't want to wear out your welcome. You don't want to just like completely blast the guy. But you also want to show like you're a peer. You know, you want to ask intelligent questions. You want to provide feedback that may prompt him to think somewhat differently, because at the end of the day, we're now on the same team, and you know, both of our goals is trying to make the Chicago Cubs better and win another World Series.
That's awesome. All right, well, let's kind of transition right into movement a little bit, because although I'm more of our pitching guy and Jason's the hitting guy, we both understand movement really well. I know you understand movement at an elite level. I guess no pun intended. There's a lot of puns going on right now. But so I noticed in one other podcast, I heard something that you said. It was said really, really well, and I liked how you said it. You said, everything we do in baseball is trying to fix athletes with a bat and a ball in hand. Can you kind of expand on that and talk a little bit how that pertains to movement?
Yeah, I think we have to deal with failure so often in our game that when it's not going well, that players say, well, it has to be – the first thing they always go back to is mechanics. And while I am probably most known in our industry for being very technical or knowledgeable about mechanics,
yep,
I'd say it myself that is probably the least important factors of what makes a hitter perform in a game. It's really important, but there's been – I guess I'll say it this way. There's probably not one hitter in baseball that has a perfect swing, like just a kinetic, perfect swing. So every hitter has to feel, how am I going to manage and compete and perform with what I bring to the table? So with that being said, I think that we go too far of thinking anything that's wrong in my performance is something mechanical, because that's what everybody first goes back to. And so they go back to a drill, like, oh, I got to change where my hands are, I got to change my stance, or I'm going to do this drill, and everything is corrected with a bat and ball in hand. When in reality, from the mechanics standpoint, it's usually just a flaw in the way they move as a human being. And that really goes back to, if you want to get really deep, it's how you start to develop when you start crawling and when you start walking. Your body starts to develop neuromuscular signals and patterns that you will carry through with you in life. And it continues through adolescence, when how you played on the playground, what sports you were exposed to as a youth athlete. When did you start strength training? Have you been a one sport player most of your life where you become a one pattern mover? Well, all of these things combined are going to create what we call movement biases, that your body tries to use what performs really well and keep dormant the muscles that don't. And that evolves in a bigger cycle where the stronger muscles become more prevalent and the dormant ones still sit back even more. And that makes the biases even greater. So by the time you get to a more mature level, so post-puberty, and you're talking high school, college, and professional athletes, those movement inefficiencies are very, very prevalent. And they're hard to fix. They're hard to overcome. So you can't do that swinging a baseball bat. You have to do it attacking the individual movement deficiency isolated in a drill or first and then testing environment. And it shows up. Once you learn how to identify those things, you're like, oh, that's why that player always turns his torso early and has length in his swing. They can't disassociate, which means they can't stabilize one segment of their body and move another one. It all goes back to, like, the more you rewind, the more it all makes sense. And I've been guilty of that too myself as being a private instructor 10, 15 years ago. If there's one area that I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years that I missed on and I shouldn't have, because this is what my master's degree in is kind of, the human body and movement. It's like, how in the hell, with all that I bring to the table, did I miss on this 10 or 15 years ago? So we spend a lot of time on it. You'll hear a lot of pro teams talking about it now, but it's something that we've instituted with our 8-year-olds, with our professional players. They come in and do movement prep that's specific to them, that we identify out of their movement screen, and they'll start the day with that before they hit. So it's trying to wake up those dormant areas of their body just to make them move more efficiently.
Yeah. You also expanded on, in that same podcast, talking about just having body awareness. And it's easy to say that until you work with any age athlete and you get them to become more aware of their body. Can you talk a little bit about just body awareness and how at home right now, some players, whether they're youth or college or whatever level, can start to become more in tune with their body and aware of what's going on?
How many youth players do you think are watching this right now? Just
right now, it's in and out, like single, double, or low double digits.
Okay. So
but then it's going to be sent out, and we're going to send it back out to them in some form.
Okay. We'll play with this for a minute. So,
all right.
Talking about body awareness, I refer to this in what we call dynamic balance. So I think one of the biggest issues that youth athletes have is they struggle to be able to control their body. And dynamic balance is defined as your ability to control the body on one leg for an extended period of time. And so you think about the sports that do that really well, or arts, and I can narrow it down quickly for you. It's gymnastics, it's figure skating, it's dance. And those girls and guys that all can control their body on one leg for an extended period of time, you would all say that they have great balance. The balance is really a neurological thing. It's the brain being comfortable with the body's feel of, I'm not going to fall down. And that's what the body is a great protectionist unit, and it senses when there is peril, and it protects the body that way. So if I'm on one leg for an extended period of time and I start to wobble, the brain says, put that leg down as quickly as you can to reestablish balance. Here's the test that I would do with a youth athlete. Stand up where you're at right now. You don't have to do this, Jason. But I'm going to lift one leg to my waist. With our eyes open, we're going to hold that for a 15 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, whether good balance or not, most of you were probably able to achieve that for 15 seconds. There were a few times I felt my ankle get wobbly, and my sense of sight started to stabilize my body, and it kept me in balance. So we're going to do that same drill and figure out, if I take the sense of sight away from you, how good are you just with your brain to feel your body and maintain balance? So this time,
I did this on
drill.
When your podcast, when you're doing this, I tried it.
But this time I'm going to say, get to a balanced position. I'm going to say, close your eyes, and we're going to do it for 15. Should you come down, just tap your toe and try to come back up. All right, here we go. Get to a balance. Close your eyes. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I went down at 3, and I know I'm bad at that. But that's your example right there. That's why players at the youth level have so poor body control. It's their brain just isn't patterned neurologically to establish good dynamic balance unless you practice that. And you'd be surprised how many professional athletes would do the same thing and fall down within the first 5 seconds. And most people, the first time they do that, fall down within the first 5 seconds. That is something that we program into their movement prep without a ball, without a bat in their hand. Just get your brain comfortable on one leg for an extended period of time. So going back to how does this affect a player mechanically, if they struggle in dynamic balance, those are the players that all rush in their tempo of their stride. They land heavy in their front leg. And both of those things will either create bad bat angles, bad sequencing because their legs aren't able to fire ahead of their upper body. But a ton of bad mechanical things all come from, I simply can't control my body because my brain won't let me do it yet. It's not comfortable in doing so. So you can see how deep that really gets to a very simple mechanical cue of, hey, kid, don't lunge into your front leg. It gets quite a bit deeper than that when you get under the surface.
Absolutely. I'm glad you did that and demonstrated, because when I was listening to you talk about that in another podcast, I paused, I went and I tried it, and definitely within the first 5 seconds was all wobbly. I tried it like 3 times. I think I made it to like 10 seconds. I almost made it 10 seconds there. But
yeah, that's a fun one. I do that in all of our hitting classes, and that's a good one to do to prove your point.
Yeah. All right, Jason, I'm going to let you get this one. I've got a couple more after that, and then you guys are going to get deep. So I know you've got a question about some movement in the past, and Justin already kind of alluded to it a little bit.
Well, the first thing I wanted to talk to him about was, when you hear everyone talk, it's how new and different everything is now. The swing is different. And I know we're working with more advanced physical specimens now just because of, training that's come along and what we've learned. But when I look back at hitters I looked at Roger Hornsby's swing. I've looked at hitters from every decade that I could get video on up to the current day. And I just don't see, from a sequencing standpoint and a bat path standpoint, there being any difference from then to now. Now, I know there's minutia stuff, little small things that we can pull out, but I'm talking like the big sequencing parts of the swing and the path of the swing. I don't see that changing. Do you agree with that? Disagree with
I
that?
agree with that completely. I think the aesthetics of it have really changed. The beginning, the way it looks, and the end especially. And everybody focuses on the aesthetics because they're easiest to see. So think about the parts of the swing that are easiest to see with the human eye. It's the parts that are happening slowly. But the parts that are happening really, really fast that you need cameras to help you go back and see again. And what I call that is, it's really the engine of the swing. It's the turn itself. And for me, when I'm looking at 2D video, I talk about good versus bad being about how tight the turn is. Now, you could define a tight turn as a short swing, one that's inside the ball. Those are accurate. The hand staying tight to the body, but not yet leading the body. Those are all accurate sayings, but that has been the same from when Babe Ruth played, certainly to your favorite hitter of today as well.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
That was a good night hug.
Aw. All right, so
Enjoy
I've
those
got
while they last.
What's that?
I said enjoy those while they last.
Yeah, no, I do. I've taken that was a big. It's kind of a long story that I won't get into, but I interviewed for 4 teams in 4 consecutive days early in this whole process, and I was flying all over the country, and I had one suit that I was changing shirts in every other day, and I'd quickly come back to Chicago and get another shirt and go out again. But a big concern ended up being of mine when we were going through the last day before deciding on a job that I knew was going to be important to me and my family. Was one team came up, and my daughter's sitting on the couch, and we let her listen in, my oldest one. And she says, "Daddy, I don't want you to go to blank city." And I kind of looked at my wife, and I say, that is something you have to keep in consideration. It wasn't ultimately the determining factor. Like, there's so many positives about the Chicago Cubs that every day that I'm there, I'm more and more grateful for. But how do you look a little kid in the eye when you're getting ready to jump into something that you're going to be entrenched in? Because that's just the way my personality works. Looking back, for many, many reasons, but it was hard to leave Chicago at that point.
Gosh, I can't imagine. I say my son turns 1 in just like a week or so. So, oof. All right. So this is the moment everyone's been waiting for. I'm just going to keep it simple with one question because it translates to just everything in athletic movement and just all sports. Foot awareness. This is something that we break down with our guys. I think it's something that a lot of people don't talk about, just having awareness of what's going on with your feet. Can you talk a little bit about that, how it pertains to hitting?
I think you're ahead of the curve on that, and I agree with you there. The way the foot interacts with the ground gives you the ability to stay in a loading mechanism and also create speed in your front leg. And we know that energy is created and stored better through the posterior chain than it is your quads. So what does that mean for your foot? That means it's coming from the back half of your foot, both in storing energy in your loading mechanism and creating speed once your front foot hits the ground as a hitter. We have the opportunity that we've been able to test that on force plates, but we see that players that load into their toes or push off their toes either lose their load immediately by coming out of their back leg, and you'll see their back knee come unbent and get extended, or they push heavy to their front side. So what I tell players, like, your toes are definitely gripping the ground, but the energy is being created and stored in the back half of your foot. And I think for players that have had issues in that, and I'm talking older guys now, but it's still relevant to the players you're dealing with, as I tell them, like, when you're in the weight room, because we do a lot of unilateral work in the weight room, like, feel how your feet interact with the ground, whether that's during step-ups, whether that's during lunges, especially anything you're doing on one foot. You'll feel your toes gripping the ground to help for balance, but you're going to feel the pressure in a squat pattern, a hinge pattern of a deadlift coming from the back half of your foot. Hitting is no different. We're creating some sort of a hinge pattern to get into a load, but we're trying to store that energy in more of a squat pattern when you get into your legs and bend your knees. So I think that's really important and overlooked, including even your shoes. I put a Twitter thread out a couple weeks ago where I was watching, because we have no baseball to watch, Cal Ripken Jr.'s record-breaking game. And I was joking, as I did in 1995, I had high-top shoes because King Griffey Jr. had them and it looked cool. But knowing what I know about the feet now, like, baseball players, probably as well as most of the general population, tend to have very tight ankles. And so you put a tight ankle player into high tops, and it's making their ability to stay into a hinge or a squat into their legs even more difficult. So you don't see players running around with high top shoes as hitters very much anymore. And I said, if anything, you'd want more of a running shoe that just happen to have spikes on the bottom, something that's more flexible and gives the ankles a better free range of motion.
Absolutely. All right, Jason, I will let you guys just go at it. So take her away.
Well, I have one question that wasn't on our list of questions that kind of got prompted with the force plate stuff. Have you found in your lab that there is an ideal percentage of weight that needs to be into the back foot for a certain amount of time, and then how much or what percentage of that weight gets transferred into the front foot? I know if that's a trade secret, I understand.
No, it's not.
But,
there's certain trade secrets I can't give you on, and won't, that anything is new that's come from revelations I've gotten in the last 6 months since I've been hired. But we put all the force plate stuff public 2 years ago. And basically you're trying to get 100% of your back leg loading force into your back leg, which means you have to carry and balance that energy in one leg. And essentially that energy is going to be transferred into your front leg at post. Your front leg should be just as strong as the back leg. So it's going to take the energy derived from the back leg, add on to it. So the front leg should double the back leg's force. So essentially a generic answer is 100% and 200%.
Wow, 200. I wouldn't have guessed that.
It can be really high. It can be really high. And it varies across the board. We just see your guys with good speed creation have very high numbers on that.
So are you seeing differences with those numbers in youth athletes compared to more elite athletes or older athletes?
Not good youth athletes, no. It'll be the same for them as well. Now, if you have
really?
There's a higher percentage of less efficient youth players, right? Because they're learning the skill acquisition part of this. But not to be mistaken, I am pretty sure out of the thousands of people that we've tested, I think the number 3 force producer was an 11-year-old kid. And we do force plate jumps too, just to kind of test your twitchiness, which we call your rate of force development. And he was also number 2 or 3 in that. So that was 2 years ago. He's growing and progressing now, but he's still higher than most professional athletes in terms of how well his legs interact with the ground and how quickly he does it. So good upside for a guy like that, right?
Is that because of the lack of pre-programmed bad stuff at the younger ages?
Not necessarily for that. That's just sheer, basically how quick your stretch reflex is on being able to create force and speed. And if you want to simplify that, is how if I were to jump, like I have my computer on a box for box jumps right now. If I were to stand on top of this 24-inch box, jump down, so I'm receiving energy into the ground, and then jump back up to it, how deep do I have to get into the squat to quickly get back up to the top of the box? And so that's going to be different from player to player. The quicker I can go boom and get back up there, the better. And a lot of that is, and you could develop that, but some of that is just sheer athleticism that this player just happens to have a really good start at. But those are things you have to train. It's the things that we do now that we know how important the rate of force development is, of when your front foot lands into the ground, how quickly can you receive energy and then produce energy back up the system. So that's one of the drills that we do in terms of either our pre-movement prep or something we're doing after we're hitting. As we're standing on a box, we're jumping down, we're trying to get as quick as we can back up to it. Just, you have to train the body to work explosively, dynamically, and fast, and can't expect it, going back to this, can't expect it just to happen with a bat because you have a bat in your hand.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great info. And that's such a simple thing that we could do to see what our athletes are doing, and then again train it, make them better at it. That's awesome. Then
yeah, you don't have to have a force plate to necessarily gauge that, but you'll see some pretty drastic differences from your athletes if you do a simple test like that. I think there's a lot of validity for power into just sheer either rotational medicine ball tosses with a radar gun on the med ball, because the height of the med ball will affect how far it's actually going. But there's, in my mind, and I don't have an answer for this necessarily because we just started testing it in our facility in Chicago, but in my mind, there is a distinct correlation to power output as a hitter of how much force I can create through this 10-pound medicine ball. However you decide you want to throw it, I think rotational makes more sense for a hitter or thrower, but some people will do it straight overhead too. But you're going to find your stronger athletes that hit the ball harder also throw the medicine ball farther. So it's like, that's the way we should be training, correct? We shouldn't be just training. Hitting the baseball and the skill acquisition piece of that can never go away, but you're not going to really progress further than the skill if you're not challenging the body too. So one isn't more important than the other, but you got to do both. I tell our players, for every hour you're spending on your skill acquisition in lessons and stuff, which they'd love to do, you better be spending 1 hour equally on your body.
Awesome.
Amen.
Let's transition from the lower half to the top half. When I first got introduced to your program, I had learned enough at the time to know that the top half of a lot of our hitters was way early, and to the point that I was seeing things I couldn't physically do, with elbows getting in front of belly buttons, beating the hands. You've seen all those things from youth kids 1,000 times. And I can't, you'd have to call an ambulance if I did that. So I was seeing a lot of that on video, didn't know the cause, didn't know how to fix it. And then I stumbled onto your program and we brought you in for camps. And that was probably one of the biggest aha moments early on in this whole teaching, youth how to hit thing for me. And what I found was we got into the scap load, and I know that was something I got from you in your program, was the scap load. And we went scap load hog wild, man. We were like scap load freaks back in 2014, 15, 16, to the point that I think we over-taught it or made it too much of a focus. And then what we had is we had kids just having this big, huge scap load move, and it was affecting everything else possibly negatively. And so what I've kind of gotten into now is I still want our kids to have that top half anchor, but we've been focusing more on the timing of that and it being a little bit more subtle than this big, huge, dramatic move back. I mean, where are you at with the scap load now? I know that that's evolved, and I know with K-Best we can kind of measure some of that stuff now, and probably other things we can measure that stuff with. Are you still as big of a scap load guy as you were? And if not, how has your knowledge of, with technology evolved from that?
I don't think it's the technology that has tailored that as much as it is the movement capability of the athlete. In two ways. One, most youth players, and we're talking 16 and under, if I were to cross my right ankle over my left right now, which I am, and I got my hands behind my head, now I'm going to turn my torso to my right. So the ankle's crossed over, probably looks opposite in the video I'm going to show you, but that's my thoracic rotation capability. For me, it's about 25 or 30 degrees. your athletes are going to do this, and they're going to be able to turn to 80 and 85, if not 90 degrees. So the rope in the middle of their body is really long and needed to take the slack out, or they're going to have the racing elbow and they're going to have length in their swing. The downside is most players that age aren't strong enough rotationally to stabilize that mobility. And that goes further up the chain into the scap. So if I'm doing the scap test, I'm going to put my elbows flat to the ground. I'm going to keep them flat to the ground and retract. So I went about 1 inch right there. Your players are going to be able to go 5 to 7 inches. So again, a very long rope in the middle of their body, which requires a bigger loading mechanism. So the timing of the scapula is always going to be crucial. It has to happen against the forward move of the center of mass, which is your belly button. So belly button gains ground, I resist against it. And it has a number of benefits of angles to the ball, sequencing for sure. But what I find is most players that still aren't strong enough in their scap to resist that, they're going to counter that by over-rotating their torso in. And now you're in a huge way of trouble. Because once that torso turns in internally, way in there, which a lot of youth players will, we know that they're going to have that early fly out because it ruins their time to contact. And it's like, oh man, I've got to get this barrel to ball somehow, and I end up getting long. I cast away from myself. Now there are hitters in the big leagues that rotate their torsos in pretty far, and Mike Trout's the best hitter on the planet and does the exact same thing. But there are more efficient ways for professional players that do have that type of internal rotation of their torso to get to the ball than what your youth athletes are going to be able to do right now. So it hasn't changed. I think it's more patterning their movement capabilities to their hitting style, and trying to make sure they are stretching the right parts of their body and not falsely doing it with just like, oh, I'm not strong enough in my scap yet, I'm going to over-rotate my torso. But we spend a ton of time on scapular conditioning with handstands, overhead carries. I got like a little hitting lab in my basement here. Overhead carries is taking a kettlebell, putting it bicep to ear, and like walking down the sidewalk with that. I do 3 sets of 75 meters with that overhead before I go to a heavier kettlebell. And you're getting core, you're getting scapular stability, but a ton of strengthening exercises for that. The 2 areas of a player's body that are going to be last to develop in adolescence are going to be their core and their upper back region, their scaps. Those may be the 2 most important regions for determining whether I can have a short swing or not. So the players that have come to us that are really young, that we always interview them and ask them, like, what is your previous sports background? Because you have an uncanny ability to do this ahead of what your age says you should. They're all gymnastics people or wrestlers. And because they have better body awareness, better functional strength, and have usually better proprioception too, because wrestlers are moving their body into all different types of positions, and gymnasts have to be uber aware. In both those sports, you have to be really strong at. So they're usually the ones that can pick it up first, which is why I'm such a big advocate of playing multiple sports for as long as you can.
So what kind of, if any, do you make any compromises with the younger kid that's hypermobile that also lacks the strength to perform the scap load correctly?
Sometimes that's a hard conversation. I've had a few in that 13 to 15-year-old range is the hardest point, because you'll have some usually very slim players that are just not very strong yet, but their bodies are sprouting, they're growing taller, so they're not getting wider, and you see the length in their swing. And I kind of tell them there are ways I can put duct tape on this for the time being, and there are going to be some really old school cues of pushing, being short, taking your knob to the ball. And that can kind of counter that for a while. But I say, if we're going to put this piece of duct tape on it right now, just know that we're going to have to change that pattern too in a couple of years. So, and some people have chosen to do that. And then you're just like, okay, we're going to have to tackle this a little different way once you get strong enough to hold that. So that, like I said, that can be a tough, difficult decision to come to. But for me, it's always going to be about how can I replicate a path consistently, and that will vary from individual to individual. For me, that's staying as square as possible as I can. Sometimes that's moving the hitter's hands closer to launch and then trying to develop a clean avenue for their path to get direct to the ball to stay in the zone as long as it can. But I've been right there with you. I can recall firsthand with 2 players that will both be college-bound players that fit that exact mold. And 2 years ago, I said, for the time being, we're going to do a lot of high T work. We're going to be short to the ball. But in a couple of years, when you're strong enough to do this, I'm going to have to take you out of those drills and get you back into a more flowing pattern that's going to be more efficient for you in energy transfer down the road. And in those cases, both of them worked. But that's the difficulty with coaching athletes of that age, man. Like, you're dealing with a highly difficult skill to do correctly, and you're not functionally strong enough to do it to begin with. Like, you're putting pipe cleaners on exhaust pipes and duct tape to hold your engine together. That's eventually you're gonna have some holes, and those are some really bad analogies all strung together right there. But you get where I'm going with that. Where with professional players, you know where their faults lie, and you can coach directly to that fault. If I have a guy that collapses his backside, we'll do a lot of high T work, and we'll use old school cues of getting down and on top of the ball and taking a short process. If I have guys that are really steep, we do a lot of low T work, and we're learning to turn our torso underneath balls and get connected deeper. So you might hear me coach youth and professional players in back-to-back lessons or in a practice saying completely opposite things just based on what the need of that athlete is. That's why hitting has to be so individualized, and we have to be flexible enough and humble enough as instructors to think that there isn't one way to do it, and we have to, as a good coach, tailor to the needs of our athlete in the way they process information, simple or complex, and what cues we need to use with them, whether we believe in what we're actually saying or not. Like, there's times that I've looked over my shoulder and I said, if somebody was filming me right now and they know what I'm an advocate of when I teach the swing, and they heard what I was saying to this athlete right now, they would just blow me up. But that's the way it is, right? Like, we have to teach to what makes the player do what I need him or her to do. Whatever I say that gets them to do it correctly is correct, whether you believe in what you're saying or not. It's not about being the smartest person of trying to write a book on hitting and reinvent the wheel. It's how am I going to most effectively get my athletes to perform? And I'll say all types of crazy stuff. Then in the back of my mind, I'm going, wow, this is wild. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. But it's getting my hitter to perform, then it's right for that hitter. So that's why I say you have to be humble enough to step outside yourself. And it's all about them, man. It's not about us.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I've learned from you is when I first got onto this, it was like, oh, I found this new toy, this bright, shiny object, and I'm learning all this stuff about it. But then once I went down that road, I got kind of snobby and was like, I don't want to hear swing down. I don't want to hear all that old school stuff that, we were taught. I'm now in this lane, and I was proud of being in that lane, and I was almost ashamed to say all of those things. And then I've heard you on many different occasions say that, and it's opened my mind up to be like, well, I guess this new stuff is cool, but at the end of the day, I got to make this kid a better hitter, and whatever I got to say to him to make him a better hitter is really what's right for him. It doesn't matter whether it's a cool thing to say or not.
Yeah, I'd say there's way more what we would consider from being in the academy life, more old school cues in professional baseball. And being in it for a while, I've recognized there's a need for it, for the fact that you're dealing with the highest velocity in the history of the game, and it's all at the top of the strike zone. So if you have any length off the backside or any early collapse, our shoulders are going to tilt underneath a low pitch. We all know that. But if I got a guy attacking me at the top of the zone with 98 to 100, and I do this as my first move, good luck, right? So what we focus on with higher velo pitchers is I'm working from the top of the zone, knowing I still have time to work underneath balls at the bottom of the zone, but not vice versa. So I think a lot of the focus is on being short, being direct, and you're going to hear a lot of those. I think it's with a negative connotation of, and it's kind of neat for me to be on both sides of it, from the academy life or people online. They're saying, no, it's BS. That's not the way to swing. These guys don't know what they're talking about. To the reality of having to face 98 at the top of the zone, it's like, I'm in survival mode, man. Like if I have to think this to get to that ball, then this is right? So
Right.
I think that's the negative connotation that pro coaches or athletes don't know what they're actually doing. They do. They're knowing what they're actually doing in order to combat a very difficult thing to do, right? So when you think of youth players that we've taught forever and ever, like we want to attack underneath the ball and make that move with a positive attack angle, pro hitters are doing that, but they're not thinking that they're doing that and still are.
Right.
This is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah, it's the real versus feel argument. The only thing that kind of, and I know you and I have had this conversation before, the only thing that kind of frustrates me with professional hitters is when they go on, MLB Network or whatever the case may be, and they start saying that they do that without saying that they feel it and they really don't do it. And then kids take that literally. I mean, I feel like we're fighting against that a little bit. I understand them saying they have to feel something to create something. Totally get that. But when they actually say that that's what they do, that's when I scratch my head and I'm like, gosh, I feel like we're banging our heads against the wall a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that because I'm sure what they think in most cases is what they're doing because that's the way they process it. So I could see that for sure. And that's just the hard thing of filtering through the mindset of a hitter and taking everything literally. Like ultimately you have to find what works for you, and that becomes your cue. And Albert Pujols' cue of this may not work for you, but there are hitters too that at the professional level that do this way too much that they think, well, I have to, and I won't use hitters' names, but there's certain hitters that think, I've got a guy that's attacking me at the bottom of the zone because they know I'm steep, that I'm going to try to hit 3 of the highest fly balls to center field that I can today. Now, in reality, are they going to hit 3 of the highest fly balls to center field? No, but that's what they have to do to get their torso at the correct angle to attack what the pitcher's trying to do to them. So whatever gets a player to do what they need to do successfully, again, goes back to it is the correct cue for them. What we do as coaches, I think, helps us understand what goes through the player's psyche is when a player gets it, I ask them immediately, what did you feel in that moment? That rep, what did you feel? And hopefully they have an answer. But when they give you that answer, that is their cue. So I got to have that in my Rolodex in my mind or write it down somewhere at the end, is I might have the same hitter flaw on 4 of my hitters, but they process internally to do it right 4 different ways. That's how I have to cue them. In hitter D here, if I use the same cue that hitter B has for hitter D, it may not work for them, even though we're trying to get to the same place. So that makes coaching really hard because we don't have one hitting philosophy. If you have 70 players in your program now, guys, you got 70 different hitter philosophies you got to work with.
Yeah, 180 athletes actually, so it's really tough. But how much do you rely on the Berstein Principle for external cues and to create feels and to create mechanical or movement patterns that you're after where cues may not work?
I think most players, and I ask them, each player individually, I give them scenarios of, if I move your body in this position and I ask you to do this with your arm, can you process that? Or if I ask you, hey, I'm going to put this ball on the inside part of the plate right now, and I want you to hit a line drive back up the middle, which is going to force them to stay a little shorter. Which do you process? Right. And almost all of them are going to say external cues. Right. I will say the people that can execute internal cues really well get better really, really quick. But the downside of that is they also overprocess things. So it's like, how much can you actually give them? And it's just learning styles of the individual. But I do both. But again, I tailor it to what I feel the athlete best uses. I'll give you a couple examples of pro guys I can talk about. So we have a variety of different big leaguers that work in our facility previous off seasons. And Mike Tauchman for the Yankees is one that's kind of come on the scene the last couple of years. And we did a ton of work with him because we could give him a lot because he's so cerebral. He's the smartest hitter I've ever encountered. So he's like able to process things and feel minute movements that you wouldn't even be able to see with a high-speed camera, but he can feel it. So his ability to make adjustments is just uncanny. So internal cues for him are extremely effective. He can take anything that you could possibly give him. Where on the other hand, I have a player I've had for probably 12 or 15 years named Nick Solak. And at the end of the year, he was batting 4 for the Texas Rangers, and the guy's 5'10" and 175 pounds, and in the big leagues hitting home runs. And if I ask Nick to do this with his hands or this with his legs, that's not his preferred way and never has been of a learning style. But if I say here, put the ball here and hit it there, like he'll hit it 4 out of 5 times in a spot the size of like a tennis can, right? So extremely effective with external cues. But you have to get to know your athletes and how they process. And the only way that I feel like you can do that is spending a ton of one-on-one time with them, because until you build that relationship and have enough conversations with them to feel like you can really grasp how you're going to reach this player best, that's a process that takes time. And that's difficult. I feel like that's probably going into pro ball is going to be my most difficult piece initially, is getting to know a whole bunch of new athletes and understanding how they process.
So one of the challenges that we face, and this kind of goes back to the scapula, but it's really more broad than that. How do you know when stuff that seems to be taking shape in cage work, drill work, med ball work, whatever the case may be, starts to translate into the game? Because that seems to be the hurdle we're at right now, where I think we can get kids to load their scap and drill work. We can get kids to feel ground force in their drill work, and we do a lot of med ball stuff. So we're doing a lot of things without the bat and the ball in their hands to try to create better movement patterns. But I'm still struggling with how I take what I see there and get it into a game, because it seems like once we turn the machine on high velocity or they get off the live pitcher, some of that goes out the window. And connecting that dot has really been the tough thing for us recently. Like I said, we've cleaned up a lot of stuff. It's that dot, that last dot that we're having trouble connecting.
Yeah, I think you have to progress to that last dot gingerly a little bit. So like you're developing the movement pattern, and then you eventually have to be able to do this on a variety of different time constraints until you work yourself up to the machine, whether that's short overhand toss and eventually BP, but not throwing the biggest challenge at them right away of, well, I've done this for a couple of weeks and all of a sudden I'm jumping on a machine and let's hope that it sticks, because ultimately when put under duress, which is anxiety due to heightened velocity and a more competitive setting, that the body's going to revert back to whatever it feels most comfortable with, right? So it's like gun goes off and you hope your dogs are running after the pheasants, right? And instead of running the other direction. But that's reality. That's the fight or flight of competition. So I think we have to prepare them for the test a little bit better of just like easing your way up to that and knowing when they're ready for that next step. Because that final step of the test can set you back a long way. I mean, that test is necessary. You got to know whether this is going to work in a game or not. At some point, they're going to have to see velo from a good distance. But it can set you back like, oh, man, that didn't work. And now your player's psyche is, what have I been doing this for? It didn't help. I mean, just got the bat knocked out of my hands. So it's like –
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. In our camp, we have about 12 weeks from late October to probably February, where we're doing all of our drill work and kind of going through the sequential hitting plan, essentially modified with some stuff. But then when February comes around, it's all live. And we do that to get our pitchers' pitch counts built up, to get our catchers working with our pitchers, blocking balls in live settings. So we have a ton of live work. And what always, I'm so excited going into that, because I've seen a kid progress and get so much better during those 12 weeks. And then we put a bat in his hand and he's got one of his teammates throwing gas at him, and it just looks like he's never swung the bat before. And you're like, oh, I thought I was, you're so excited to see this kid flourish. And then it seems like there's a revert back to before you ever saw him.
Yeah, I think the game speeds up on a lot of players at every level. And our challenge as coaches is to get them as comfortable as possible to help them slow the game down. And honestly, a lot of that might be a more mental block than a physical one a lot of times, because it happens at every level of baseball. You'll hear players talk about, well, they know when the game speeds up, that hitting just gets way, way harder, and the guy seems like he's throwing 105. But any way that we can help them slow the game down by, especially when they're just starting off live pitching, it's already going to seem really fast to them, of getting them to start earlier and slow their tempo down. By doing both of those things, those are two easy, really good cues that most hitters can grasp on trying to controlling their breathing, controlling their move in the batter's box, starting it early just to give them a little more freedom as trying to slow the game down. Because if they try to match the intensity of the situation where it's first live right at the beginning, pitcher's throwing harder, it's probably grunting, and all of a sudden I feel like I've got to increase my energy level to match that, and I started getting my body out of control in the advance, trying to match his intensity, then the game's going to speed up on me. So I don't think there's one distinct answer for that. I think that's a common problem across all levels of baseball and hitters, is they will feel like when they're not going well, of course, their movement patterns are not going to be good. And generally, the first thing that I go to is, are you starting on time? And of course, if you're not starting on time and your timing's not good, everything's going to speed up and your mechanics are going to go to hell. So that's oftentimes when it looks really bad, it's because it has to, because they're speeding their body up, which is changing the entire movement pattern you've built over the previous 2 or 3 months.
Well, the other thing that we see right around that time of the year is we usually start coming out of Christmas break working on timing for those 4 to 6 weeks leading into live hitting. We do a ton of timing work. Using a lot of the drills from your sequential hitting plan. We'll have guys with a tee and trying to time it up on certain spots in the delivery and all of that. But that's the other thing that seems to speed up on them, is all that work that we do on timing after we come back from Christmas. It seems like once the game speeds up, we're not loading on time, or we're loading too late. Usually we're loading way too late. I mean, I think you could agree with that. Almost always it's late. Very few kids are early. So that's the other thing I struggle with, is do we spend more time on timing and less time on mechanics, or is it really just a mindset thing? Is it really just things speeding up and it doesn't matter what we work on and how much we divvy that out or allocate it? It's just the game speeding up, and it's just me not being patient, knowing that maybe this will happen at 13 or 14 when they're 10 right now or 11 right now. Like, that's the thing, is sometimes are we on the right page, heading in the right direction, and I'm just not patient enough and it's going to happen? Or is this kid in trouble with his baseball career? Like, I worry about that. I don't want the kid to stop.
I think that's a valid concern. What I like to do is, I think kids are visual learners, and I'm sure you're doing this already, but I like getting the iPhone with the 240 frames per second. And if you can get it from the side, it's better, but sometimes it's just from the umpire view. And I show them, when does your center of mass, which is your belly button, start to move forward, and where is the ball at release? So if the ball is out of hand and it's on the way already, and their center of mass isn't gaining ground, you could have done all mechanics with Alex Rodriguez, Mike Trout, and Albert Pujols, all three as your hitting coaches for the previous 12 months. It isn't going to matter, right? Because if you start late, everything's going to be sped up, and mechanics, or your best swing, we'll just call it, your A swing is going to be compromised. So I think that visual of you think you're starting on time, but that ball is 10 feet out of the pitcher's hand before you advance, that ain't going to work.
Well, here's a drill that, and this, I feel like I made this drill up, so you can critique it if you'd like. But what I did for that very reason is I put an L screen right in front of our pitcher. So I've got one of our instructors throwing, and I've got an L screen right in front of him. So when the ball comes out of his hand and hits the L screen, then the hitter knows he has to be moving forward at that point. And so I'm giving him that visual cue of, man, if I'm still on the ground and haven't moved and the ball's hitting the L screen, like, alarm bells should be going off, right? I'm late. And so then the other thing that we're doing is we're trying to get them to be through their load phase and into foot down by the time the ball's about halfway, so they have time to make the turn and hit the baseball. So we put another L screen halfway between the pitcher and home plate so that they get that feel, that visual. And we spend 5 weeks on that. And then when they go live, it's like everything speeds up. It's not all of them. I mean, I'm a perfectionist. I want all 180 of our hitters to do everything really well. And so those are some things that we work on for that exact timing.
Yeah, no, I think those are good. Again, I think it goes back to just the psyche of competition. When you're not processing or executing a drill for a drill's sake, and you actually have to turn the brain off and just see how it's going to respond to reaction or an external stimuli. I've got this fastball coming at me, which I don't know which way it's going to move nor its location. And I've got to let my body just react and make a ton of instantaneous decisions in less than 0.4 seconds. So that's really hard to do, right? So we put them in environments which we hope they can succeed, but ultimately they're going to have to make it automated, which is the brain shutting off. And we hope that the training that we put in front of them is going to allow them to have success. And I think that the speed of that, of where players are going to get it, is just going to be different for each individual. It's the same as learning styles in the classroom. Some kids can study as much as they want, and they have to work their rear ends off to get A's and B's. And you have the one kid that has one notebook with no notes in it the entire school year and gets all A's.
So let me go old school on you then, since we've kind of gone back and forth, old school, new school during this. And I know the force plates give you this literally, but when I think of someone's load, I kind of see it as a sound wave or a heartbeat on a monitor, and the time their foot's in the air is the size of that wave, right? And so one thing I had to do with my son mechanically is really solid, timing-wise really struggled. And so what I had to do with him is I had to shorten that wave. So I had to and he's also a tight mover, so I think it played right into this, right? So he didn't have as much slack to take out, so I think I could do this and it worked. But I had to eliminate a lot of the movement he was doing, less of a scap load, less of a leg kick, so that he could time things up more easily. And it has done wonders for him. And I'm wondering if, you know how you said we had to put duct tape on some of these kids until it's time later? Like, is that something I need to do with maybe some of our hitters, is just shorten that wavelength right now to make that timing easier until later on when they may move better or be stronger or whatever the case may be. I
think you can still take the slack out of a player's midsection, which really runs from like hip all the way around your shoulder. I mean, you can spread a hitter out, you're going to create stretch. So I still advocate for some sort of a positive move and not just a sheer ride style. So I think that's
totally agree with
difficult. But yeah, I would agree that that's one way to see. If players are really struggling and they have less feel and maybe athletic ability, I don't think simplifying is ever going to be a wrong move. You're going to hear that happen all the time. They got a lot of moving parts and you can't sync them up. Probably time to take some of those moving parts away.
Yeah. Good. I just wanted that reassurance that was kind of
especially as a better mover.
Yeah. Cool. So the last thing I had was, and this is just a fun one, I think. A few weeks ago, we were on Twins TV, and I was, I'm grateful for all the coaches I had, just like all of us are, as we were coming up. But as I got into hitting and started to learn things about it, I realized the stuff that I was taught, 20, 25 years ago was incorrect for the most part. And so I mentioned that on the Twins TV several weeks ago, and I had one of our, an actual grandparent in our program said, "Hey, well, are all the kids that you taught 20 years from now going to say that what you taught was wrong?" And I laughed and said, "I think they're going to say it was wrong 5 months ago or 2 years ago, or like it's not going to take 20 years." Where's your take on that? I know what your answer is, but I just want to hear kind of what your take is on that.
Yeah, I don't know if wrong is the right thing to say. I always say evolving.
Right.
Again, if I definitely feel like I'm in a different place now than what I was when I came to your facility and taught 4 or 5 years ago. Like hopefully I'm not even close, and hopefully in 5 years I say the same thing. What the technology has done for me, it's just allowed us to make that evolution faster and more accurate. And that's exciting because that we live in an age where technology is not going to go away. You can embrace it, you can naysay it. It's not going to go away. And hopefully I'm going to continue to be one where the industry looks at and says, this is a guy that's going to kind of steer or pioneer it. And a lot of what Travis and I do, and he's doing a ton of testing behind the scenes, our head instructor, is like, you guys don't hear about all the tests that we do that fail. We do a lot of really cool stuff. And we think, this is awesome. And like, we just wasted like 6 weeks of our life doing that because it became inconclusive or wasn't the result we thought we were going to be out of our hypothesis. But you got to do that to progress, right? You're gonna break some pieces to ultimately build something that looks really, really nice. But we enjoy that. That's part of the awesome part of our job. We want to get out in front and do some new things, but doing some new things means if you're doing it for the first time, you're probably going to refine it more than anybody will that comes after you. And that's okay. Like, I'll embrace that. I'll take that upon our shoulders as the Chicago Cubs or as my facility elite. Like, that's an awesome thing to be able to say, is like, we're not going to be scared to go into a realm that nobody else has gone before and do something maybe a little different, because it might help us for the Cubs win more games, or for elite, it might help us take some players that were going to be just average at best and help them get into varsity high school ball or college ball or beyond.
Totally going back to the movement thing, you can give us a short answer on this, I guess, because I know how long of a answer these can go when we get into assessments. We have 180 kids in our program in a 20-week camp. How often should we assess those guys?
And how many weeks do you guys go? 20 weeks?
About 20 weeks.
I would just do it at the beginning, because it's not going to change that much over a 20-week period that you're going to need to redo it. Yeah. So
that helps a ton.
Yeah, no, you do that. That's like day one. Like, know that, because the movement profile is going to change from year to year. It's not going to change in 20 weeks that drastically.
Okay, that's good to know. Good. Scott, what do you got, man?
Well, I was taking notes on both things that were talked about and through social media. So we didn't have too many crazy important questions. So I'll do a little bit of the Q&A, some of the questions or shout outs that I wrote down, and then we'll get kind of into the Twins critique, and then we'll end it with Justin kind of plugging what he wants to plug, and we'll kind of give him a shout out to what they're doing at Elite Baseball Training. So let's see. And we can go kind of rapid fire through these. We don't have to go down a rabbit hole, but first question was, why do players turn their foot inwards? Why do some hitters turn their foot inwards?
I'm assuming they mean the back foot. So that goes into a player's hip mobility capability. So if a player has really loose hips, that turning the back shoe in can lower that range of motion and shorten the length of the loading mechanism. It's not, honestly, we've tested out in the force. Like, I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to give away too much information on that one. I about gave up something good there, but
all right.
Hold on to that.
Frankie says hi on Instagram. I think that was him that gave that question. Scott Bryan wanted to hear from both of you guys what it was like to see Avery Shore, who just got drafted last year, the Diamondbacks out of Southport. So I guess Jason and Justin, you guys can both talk about it, but Justin, you can start. What was it kind of like? Because we knew in Scott Bryan, who started with the Twins when Jason kicked it off in 2012. We knew and trusted what Justin was doing, what Travis was doing up in Chicago, and kind of they decided to go that route and explore. So kind of got to see best of both worlds. So what was your experience like, Justin?
Well, he spent a lot more time with Travis than he did me, because he's a pitcher. But hearing Travis talk about him, like the drive of the kid, and again I would say that, like, more the want of just wanting to be great and not satisfied with just being good, put him in a position to where he was at. And I'm glad, honestly, he took the step into pro ball, because you don't get that opportunity. And I felt like he was ready. I remember the conversation of when we had it with the family of trying to, like, we can't, it's their lives, right? You can't, like, force a person to make this decision. But I kept saying to Travis, like, man, this is a heck of an opportunity. I'd hate to see him forgo, and not to say that he couldn't do it out of going to college, but we did feel like the maturation level of the athlete was there, and done awesome so far in the Pro Bowl. So I'm glad to think that we were right in that case.
Yeah, we had him on to kick off this Pro Series, and just the maturity level you could hear just from when he was probably 9th, 10th grade. You could just tell it showed through. Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, we had him until he was 14, and then, that's when he went up to Justin and Travis in Chicago. And the thing that I noticed with him at a young age was just how he elevated or rose to the occasion against really good teams. That's just like most people pee down their leg and want out of Dodge. And with Avery, it was like, I can't wait to get on the mound and beat this team and keep our team in the game and give us a chance to win. It just seems like he rose to that. And not a whole lot of kids do that. A lot of kids shy away from that, honestly, and he didn't. At a young age.
Next one. Yeah. I think next one's pretty quick, Justin. I think I know the answer, but earliest age that you do the functional movement screen or movement screen?
As soon as they come in the door. I do it on my 5-year-old.
Love it. I'm trying to watch my almost 1-year-old move. Importance of hand speed.
I think hand speed is a byproduct of transferring energy really efficiently from your legs through your core and then out the rest of the chain. If you try to jump the sequence and just use your hands, they're actually going to go slower.
Love it. Thoughts on Blast?
Oh, it's a great, cheap tool. I don't represent them, but I can't advocate any more for a product like theirs or Diamond Kinetics, whatever you choose to use. I think it's a cheap way to get a lot of valuable information. It's not going to tell you why your metrics aren't as good as what you'd like them to be, but it's going to at least establish what you were good at and what you're not.
Yep. One of our coaches said, sounds like he needs to make a trip down to central Indiana soon. I'm sure that's probably going to be a little bit difficult.
Well, right now, my traveling days are like, I was joking. I can't think, you guys have probably been in similar situations. Of course, I'm in Chicago in the city, and I can walk anywhere if I actually need to get something. But I didn't fill my car up with gas for 3 months because I left for spring training. I was gone. I come back. I haven't had a need to drive my car. It's like I can't think back to a time since I was 16 years old and started driving that I didn't fill my car up with gas for a quarter of a year. I guess it's like it's one of those moments that hit me. Like we're living in crazy times.
Yeah, I'm looking at my car right now and it hasn't moved. All right, that's I think all for Q&A. So before we get into kind of giving you some plug opportunities and anything else that you want to talk about. So the Twins Critique, a new segment we started this week, gives us an opportunity to tell people in our organization or outside of our organization a little bit about what we do. And then also because something that we continue to push is that we're always trying to evolve, like Justin, you were just talking about, constantly evolving. So we try to talk to experts and get their feedback. So two of the most important things that we do with our organization, Jason started this in 2012. It's something that's been consistent. Is number one, we all speak the same language. So whether it's an instructor or a coach or a player, what we teach across the board is going to be the same information. So we highly prioritize that. And then the other big thing is we're pretty much a one-stop shop. And that was Jason's vision when he wanted to start a travel organization well before 2012. That when you come in an organization for your player fees with no additional fees, that you get base running, you get catching, you get pitching, you get hitting, you get basically mental training, you get all of that in our 20-week off-season program. So with that said, and Justin, you've had a little bit of exposure to what we've done in the past, and we talked about some things today. What would your critique be? What would you say we're doing well or poorly or could add to? Or you run a really successful business.
Well, I think the most important piece that you spelled out first that can go overlooked, but I think, again, is the most important, is the consistency of the message you're trying to send your athletes. I can't think of anything that is going to frustrate players and parents and kill your business is if, let's say you have an instructor giving lessons, and I know you're probably more of just a travel organization, but you can tie it in the same way. If I have an instructor giving lessons and maybe he is a transient where he's playing pro ball and he comes back and coaches with us for a while and leaves, and this person goes to another instructor within our building and they learn conflicting information that we weren't on the same page for, that just kills you. That kills you. Like I should give that person a refund back, like immediately. That's my bad. That's me not building a system and having our philosophy disseminated throughout our entire building. They may say it differently, and our instructors, you're going to value the different styles of teaching that they have and personalities. And that's the great part about just interacting with humans. But the philosophy of the overarching of what we're trying to get done needs to be the same. So I commend you on that, because most travel organizations are not like that. They're just taking guys off the street, teaching what their previous background was, whether they're volunteering or working for a very small amount of pay. It's hard to get people to dedicate to a system, and now they have somebody also telling them, well, this is the way we want you to do it, and the guy thinks, well, that's not the way I did it. So I see a lot of other travel organizations out there that are 13 independent philosophies working under one umbrella. And I'm like, to me, that's a joke. That's like, you're in it for the wrong reason. You're in it for the coach wanting to win championships or collecting kids' checks. Like, you're not actually, that's not a true organization. That's, I mean, you can fill in the blanks there, but to me, that's just like, it's poor.
Yeah.
So I commend you guys on being able to do that. You can tell that frustrates and irks me, because you know how bad a lot of the travel baseball business is. It's a joke. And it's unfortunate that it's turned into that because of greed and ego.
Yep. I'm Jason. I think you completely agree with that. All right. So I want to end with, where can people find you? And then what do you want to tell them about Elite Baseball Training? I know you've got some programs going on there online. You've got obviously your facility and everything too.
You can find me in my basement in the north side of Chicago about 14 hours a day right now. But yeah, we have a pretty cool online membership site. It's called elitebaseball.tv, and you can do your own movement assessment. It shows you how to do that. It'll plug in your results. It'll auto-populate your individual workout plan based on your movement profile. It'll give you examples of what people in your movement profile swing like at the professional level, and it'll tailor all your drills that you need to do. So we've really changed it into becoming, and of course it houses our drill library as well as strength workout library. But we've really tailored it to the individual, which is pretty cool. And it's free for 48 hours. It's elitebaseball.tv if you want to check it out. It's a lot of cool information. And we just refilmed everything and put all of our movement prep plans in there too in the last 3-4 months. So it's all been rehashed and refreshed, which I'm really excited about. Did that right before I took off for spring training.
Yep. And then on social media?
Elite_baseball.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you want to?
Yeah, we're pretty big on the Twitterverse.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share or add?
No, it's been great talking to you guys. I think I've been to your program before. We've both come a long way, Jay, since then. And I've had multiple requests to do these type of things. It's the second one I've done today. And I've said no to a lot of them just because I don't know the individuals. And if it's not getting to a person where I don't know what the message they're trying to spread, I'm going to probably say no. But when you asked me, it was like, absolutely happy to help you guys however I can.
All right, Jason, do you have anything to add real quick?
Yeah, just to kind of go along with what Justin just said, I can't thank you enough, Justin, for the impact and influence you've had on our program over the years. Everyone in our program knows your name, and I think that has a lot to do with how much we're regurgitating your information out to our clients and our participants in our program, and we would not be anywhere near where we are if it weren't for what you do. So I'm extremely thankful and appreciative of you giving us time tonight, but then obviously everything going back before then.
Yeah, no problem. So, happy to share it. It's not a secret. I didn't invent hitting. I'll express some of what I've learned over time. I keep some of it to myself, but anybody that's willing to listen and wants to talk, I always find it, I always say humbling for me that people want to listen to me. I can't, I'll talk hitting all day. I just can't believe that people keep showing up and wanting to listen to me talk. So it's kind of weird that I really that part hasn't hit me yet, but I enjoy what I do. I'm pretty passionate about it.
I appreciate it too. And for anyone that hasn't been exposed to Justin's work or Elite Baseball Training or is not following him, I would highly suggest you do that. Jason, since I've known him before I knew who Justin was, has always talked about this guy, Justin Stone. He's this hitting guy. He communicates better than anyone I've ever met. There's been times where he's done, videos and things for us, just kind of do us a favor because we've had him out. So great guy. Can't highly recommend him enough. So for those of you tuning in live, we appreciate it. We will get this cut up and put up on YouTube. We're going to end here in a second. The three of us will stick on for a little bit after, but we appreciate it. We look forward to hopefully seeing you on Friday night again at 8:30 Eastern time. We've got Lance Wheeler, he's started Core Velocity Belt. It's been with over 500 different college programs. 25 major league organizations have used it in some form or fashion. So we're looking forward to that as well, to kind of build off the momentum that we've got going with Justin tonight. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you Friday.
Thanks, guys.